let's get started. As far as introductions, my name is Buck Buchkowski. I run human capital. I'm advising Tanner and Melissa on this deal. My firm develops boutique hotels, have several around the country, help bring other deals to market. And I could give a little bit of the backstory on this relationship here so you guys understand the context. But I've known Tanner and Melissa for some time. We've met in industry groups focused on real estate development and hospitality. They came to me about a year ago for help with their marketing materials. And I saw something in Cypress even at that time, and we got started with the deck. They ultimately took a step back to go pursue what we'll talk more about today, which was a pretty remarkable and unique pre-sale campaign where they ended up selling, a whole year's worth of rooms fully paid now ahead of even breaking ground. And that was about the time they came back to me, and we got to work together to raise the equity and debt for this project. That pre-sale funds that they received are not to be used for construction. Some people do with this sort of strategy. There's other properties that have done this pre-sale in the past, but Tanner and Melissa have fostered an amazing relationship with these people who have really bet, $700, $1,000, $2,000 for a stay 18 months in the future at a place that doesn't yet exist. And that to them is very important to keep their promise that they went out to these people with and said, hey, we're not going to use this money to build, so it's totally safe for you all. But that money is significant in that it really de-risks this project. I mean, I've opened 3 hotels at this point, and every time up until day one of launch, you're worrying, is this even going to get booked, right? And that question's totally off the table for this project. And so I was really excited to bring this to market because it makes things really easy. And where the project is at right now is just secured a term sheet from a local lender for an amazing USDA loan at incredible rates. It's a loan program backed by the government for developing lands in rural areas. So it's really supported and really subsidized by the federal government, but through a local bank. And about half of the equity is raised. So there's $300,000 left, $300,000 committed of LP capital that's separate from the $1.3 million that the sponsors have put in. This call here today is to walk through for Tanner and Melissa to tell the story quickly. So I'll leave it there. I'll let Tanner and Melissa first introduce yourselves, but get right into, I think, give a little bit of a backstory of how this project came up to today, and including finding the land, and then speak to the plan moving forward.
My name's Tanner.
I'm Melissa.
And one of the things just to high touch on, just kind of get some shop talk out of the way, is minimum investment on this deal is $100,000, as well as we will be reviewing accredited investor status. And that's just a part of how we structured the private placement memorandum for this deal. So yeah, I won't go into more about the amount of work and effort we did in pre-market, but that was really a strong validation of what we're doing and where we're going. Do you want to talk to how we got here and land and all that?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the reason I think the story behind the land is so unique is because I also think it speaks to why the land itself and what we are doing is so unique. So we were actually under contract at the time about 2 years ago in a property in Dahlonega. It was great, having some septic issues as we were kind of working with our civil engineering team. So we went back to the drawing board. But at that time, I honestly felt so discouraged. I mean, we had looked, and this is not an exaggeration, every property all the way from Blue Ridge down to Dawsonville, as west as Rome, east as Helen, for those of you who know the North Georgia area. So I go back to the drawing board. I'm kind of looking at properties, and this one property pops up. It is nondescript, no photos. All it mentions is that it has septic. So I'm like, well, I might as well check it out. So I literally drive up the next morning, walk onto the property. And as I walk into the property, all I could hear was the sound of rushing water. I'm like, what is on this property? So I literally walked down the trail and I met with this 20-foot wide creek with boulders and mossy creek. It literally leads to this 55-foot waterfall. Come to find out later on, after I'd made a no cell service call to Tanner being like, this is it. Put the offer in, which of course we got accepted, moved into due diligence period. Later on, came to find out this property has actually been in the same family since the early 1800s. It was the first time that it was actually for sale to the public, and it only been on on the market for 14 days. I mean, it's kind of this remarkable thread the needle moment, which I think really lended to our vision, which is that our vision for Cypress is to be at the intersection of all the best of resorts, but all like service and the amenities, but to be immersed in nature, and then to have all the privacy and independence of short-term rentals. And we see ourselves as really that unique market in the middle. And even being on this property felt like it kind of offered the elements of all three of those. It was currently zoned agricultural. We ended up having to rezone to commercial highway business, which is the commercial status of Pickens County, established great relationships with the county, which Tanner could speak to. And he did a ton of work just really fostering great relationships, which we continue to have. After that, we were able to work with our amazing civil engineering teams and architect teams, which we can get to in a little bit. But we were able to get our land disturbance permit back in late 2023, early 2024, septic permit, move forward through pre-booking, which we will again step back to. And then kind of where we are today is that we have broken ground, which is awesome. We broke ground back in September, have finished all of the site work, well is ready, septic is installed, power is getting installed in the next month. And we are getting ready to go vertical. So what's amazing is that where we are located, there are 20 million people who live within a 3-hour time frame. And so while there's been these unique stays that have been popping up across the country, the Southeast really is kind of a desert in terms of these unique stay luxury elements. You know, there's cheaper options, but in terms of actually the true luxury resort, they're just not there. And so we really, as we did our market research and we looked at other comparables, we found that not only do we love the North Georgia, but people are asking for this and it isn't available yet.
Really, the only comps I would say is Bolt Farms Treehouse outside Chattanooga, which is booked 100% nearly at $900 a night. So validation there. And then Blackberry Farms, which is in Tennessee, but $2,500 a night. And I think the price point in the product and then the position a little bit lower south, so close to Atlanta and Charlotte, where those others are, you know, more so drawing from Nashville. This is taking that idea that's proven and bringing it, you know, a little bit closer to a population density that wants it.
Yeah, let me jump on that to revisit the pre-booking that kind of connects to that. Is when we did the pre-booking, we have significant amount of market validation in multiple layers at kind of different invested from a guest consumer standpoint already pre-invested. So we have the pre-bookings, meaning that they've already fully paid their stay right now. That's in our business bank accounts, and we're just prepared to use that as operations. Then we have 4,500 people, which includes those 500-ish people who have pre-booked. 4,500 people put $50 down to be what we call a VIP founding member, but that's speaking with volume of their level of interest. And then above that, we have 37,000 email subscribers and 15,000 Instagram followers, 11,000 Facebook followers. The constant message by the hundreds, I've been waiting for this in North Georgia. And to be very specific on the market numbers is in 2023, 19.7 million people visited North Georgia. 42% of those are from Atlanta. And the intersect value point that we are hitting is injecting a trajectory for us in luxury and services and amenities. That's the long-term pathway that we're going with Cypress. There is a baked-in understanding in city consumers of things like off-Broadway, major concert venues, major sporting events. They're just used to finer dining. And so being able to present that audience with that level of service, we feel confident with the response we've already gotten that this nightly rate and the revenue potentials are already here. And we just have to execute on that.
And if you think about, especially with just this first phase of 3 cabins, to fill it for an entire year, you need about 400 bookings. So if you look at that funnel of nearly 40,000 subscribers to email, tens of thousands on social, but even just the 4,500 that have paid the $50 deposit, which people don't, you know, just do that. 4,500 people, that's several years of filling up this hotel, at least this phase 1 size. And then even at the future phases with additional units, the guests are already there. They already have paid the $50 to reserve the ability to book at these pre-sale rates, which, to the question that just came through in the chat, the pre-sale booking average rate was, and this was discounted, was $629, right? Around there.
Correct.
So potential to move up. Like I said, Bolt Farms, which is a similar product, worse. If you look at least from design standards, they're more cabiny, unfinished walls, etc. This is far nicer. They're at $850 to $900 ADR, and that's just about an hour or so away north.
I think they're about 2 hours away. They're very much like in the
Atlanta.
middle. They're kind of in the middle of nowhere. And there's very cool, but they're more in the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
Right. So year one
Whitwell,
was
Tennessee.
629 a night at 95% occupancy or 100.
I mean, we sold out of our first year. So yeah, 100% occupancy.
I think the one thing, just to stay on topic of the investment, the private placement memorandum, is to be clear, the investment raise is kind of split across what we internally mention as phase 1 and phase 2 construction. And that's clearly defined in the PPM. Essentially, phase 1 is the first 3 buildings, which essentially just gives us the ability. I mean, we will formally open, but that gives us the margin to really dial in the service and really dial in on bugs, issues with how we function and operate, and really dial that in. And then also, as investors, we're all participants in phase 2, which essentially goes from 3 buildings, 3 individual dwellings, to 14 dwellings, which would also include the first small restaurant and our concierge building, which is a mixed use space, if you want to think of that. So yeah, we'll just stop that in terms of general.
Yeah, important,
phase.
to understand the vision and finding investors like the ones that we have, a lot of whom are from North Georgia, that see the vision and are bought in for the long term. That's not to say there's any ill effects to your investment, but just to say, the plan is to grow and expand from here. And we have a path charted where additional financing will likely follow the same strategy of pre-sale, using the strategies that have been proven successful, and using that to help secure, in addition to the just increasing value of the property, construction financing, likely through the relationship with, is it Lake Oconee Bank or Oconee?
Oconee State Bank.
Mm-hmm.
Oconee State Bank, who loves the project, who's helped secure this amazing loan from the USDA. We've already had discussions with them about that second phase financing. That's the plan moving forward. At this time, there is no plan for additional equity raises. It's important that there's minimal dilution to initial investors, of which includes the people on this call and Tanner, Melissa.
And then to add to that, just kind of preemptively hit potential question, the entire master plan of the project, which includes beyond phase 2, has already been discussed upon rezoning with the chairman commissioner, with planning and development, with fire marshal present. So the entire county's authority rezoned on those stipulations of the planned projection of the master project, which is upwards of 30 individual dwelling buildings, 2 restaurants, and a full operating spa.
What is the projected timing for opening phase 1? Yeah, great question, Dave. So currently we're on par for May of 2025, and we're keeping all of our backers, and obviously we'd be keeping our investors as well updated should that change or shift back a little.
Hey guys, this is Justin here. I appreciate everything you've shared so far. So the 600, it's about 600 a night rate, and that's the rate to book a stay in a cabin, but you're purchasing the stay and not any kind of amenities and services on top of that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Except for the only thing that's added is our partnered hospitality group of F&B, Harvest Hospitality, is run by executive chef Nick Leahy, and that group is supplying us pre-made meals that he's created. And we already have the supply chain and everything pressed out, that when people booked, everyone who's booked already is our VIPs, and they got $150 worth of MSRP, $150 worth of pre-made meals that we will send to them to select, and then we will have those in their refrigerator upon check-in. That will cost us, at the worst, including the transport fee, maybe $40.
That makes sense. Part of what I wanted to do is just extrapolate out to where you guys really want to get to, it sounds like, which is like a Blackberry Farms competitor. And so, I mean, having stayed at Blackberry Farms, I mean, there's a massive delta between a room and then having that whole experience, and just trying to understand sort of what that path looks like for you guys, because it's more than just like a common area building, right? I mean, there's a whole hospitality, experience there at a very high level.
I think that the target and path isn't to that. And I was going to bring this up earlier, which is why I jump in. The trend that I'm seeing nationwide, that I've executed on my projects in Arizona, and that applies here, is that one of the things you see in these natural destinations is a wide gap between high end. That means the auberge Amman, Blackberry Farms of the world, and then older, dated mom and pop type places that still charge relatively high compared to similar properties in more urban environments, 350, 400, 450 a night a lot of times. And then you have those high end at 2,500, 3,000, $3,500 a night. There's a big gap and nothing in between. And one of the ways that this is getting solved, where you're providing a design and a place that is of the level of quality and design of some of those high end, you're not providing as much service, which allows you to charge $600 to $1,000 a night, not $2,500 a night like Blackberry Farm. So I agree completely with what you're saying. There is a huge delta. I think it's in that $1,500 a night difference. And the reason that this category is developing, the further backstory is what's happened over the last 10 years. Airbnb coming into the market, bringing vacation rentals to the mass market for the first time. Vacation rentals have always been around. They overtook Hilton and Marriott in sales over the last 2 or 3 years. Airbnb is what I'm talking about. That brought in new operating models where people didn't get all that service at like you would at a Blackberry Farms. It brought in new unique concepts that were able to be out on the bounds of nature. People were able to try those things out and reset the priorities and preferences. And what we're seeing across the country and globally is that people will prioritize unique design and unique experience and forego the service. And you see that with the rise of Airbnb. People on some levels, in some instances, are getting no service with their stays. So adding back that concierge building, having the restaurant partner and the restaurant on site, being on the bounds of nature, that is still far, far above the Airbnb competition. We don't need to match Blackberry Farms to hit the rates that we're already hitting. That's just a total, Blackberry Farms and those types of places is just a totally different category.
I love the vision, and I'm just trying to understand, like, with what you're opening in phase one, does it work without having to then have the spa and the kind of common area? There's a lot to that. I'm sure you guys are gonna make it happen, but it's complex, right? It's way more complex than just having
dwelling.
dwelling.
It's a 15% cash on cash net to the LP if just 3 cabins continued to operate.
These first buildings are 892 internal and then 700 covered space, which is rather significant for an individual single dwelling, at least from your typical hotel average accommodations. We felt that it was appropriate to introduce these slightly smaller buildings in conjunction with the restaurant. So that, just to communicate that we've already been doing efforts to increase the viability off of the 15% that we feel confident in phase one, and we'll just increase that on phase two.
You had guests choose the phase two option. Part of that being that the amenities, but also the types of units. And I think that speaks to validating the expansion plans.
And in some ways, we shouldn't even mention really the spa yet, because what is here and what is in the PPM is phase one, which is 3 units,
Sure.
And then phase two, which is up to 14 units, including the restaurant and the concierge. So with the expected exit at year 7, and again, just like it is our job, obviously we've, financially responsible and to make the best financial decision for everybody involved. So we kind of did that as just like a framing, and also just to even say that, like, we were very clear with our backers and with all of our VIPs, like, here's what we expect in phase one, here's what we expect in phase two. And so people booked that expecting what we've laid out here. The spa and those other things coming down the road are things that, again, are more of like would be like a master plan. If we get to year 7, we say, hey, like, it makes the most financial sense for us to continue. Investors are excited to continue. Let's keep moving forward. Then again, then we take that bridge as we cross that with the bigger, more complex amenities, as you mentioned, Justin. But again, this is in thinking about these two, we're thinking phase one. These are the elements of phase one and phase two.
And mention, you did a little bit, what is zoned and allowed, and the opportunity to expand, and why we left it at what we did as far as the model.
So Melissa touched on that. It was agricultural. It's moved to what they call highway business, old term for general business. And it's really expanded the capacity. Yeah, commercial. Really expanded the capacity of the property, which is reflected in the MAI appraisal that we had conducted. So even before the construction, the as-is value doubled the land itself, just simply on the rezone. What is specifically defined in that hearing with the commissioners is 30 dwelling buildings. Now, that doesn't define how many keys those 30 buildings have. Many of them will be, yes, single dwelling units, but some of those may look more like the communal group stays, so more micro hotel. So one building, 4 keys, and then a communal interior or exterior shared space, maybe a fire pit, maybe a living room with a kitchen. Those buildings we have yet to define. The other building types we will have as multi-bedroom, more family oriented.
And also with that rezone, I mean, we also have permission to do 2 restaurants, a full spa. We actually have for up to 15 amenity buildings, and are allowed to define that however we want to. So again, the county is very much on board, which is why we laid out the full site plan. So they understood what we could do, and we're giving us permission to really, again, do the full project if we end up deciding to move to that full expansion.
So with that, what's the avatar of like your ideal client?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have kind of said it's a late 30s, early 40s couple who,
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Did you say avatar? Is that what you meant?
Why don't speak to who has booked thus far? You guys get so much visibility in the
Oh,
Facebook,
got it. Yeah.
not even avatar. Who are the customers as of today?
Yeah, I would actually say it's probably true. It's probably ranges from like early 40s through mid 50s would probably be the average. Most of them seem like married couples who are really excited to come. We've got a lot of people who booked and their spouse doesn't know and they're bringing for anniversaries and for birthdays. We've already had people reach out. So definitely there's like an event focus. And then I'd say another element of that is people who are really into wellness and who are just excited for like that high-end immersion experience. I'd say those are probably two of the biggest kind of psychographics in addition to the demographics of about 40 to 55.
The avatar in kind of perspective is the city dweller, is the person needing to get engaged with nature.
Without traveling 6 hours to do it.
Yeah, a lot of these places, even Blackberry Farms, Bolt Farm Treehouse, these places are much more distance, which again, to the credit, Blackberry Farm has a beautiful encapsulated environment where you don't need to go anywhere else. And I love those. Our unfair advantage is our proximity to the city. We are right on the edge. Jasper is called the first mountain town. And literally the first exposure to the Appalachian is Jasper, at least from this part of the South. And I grew up in Southwest Virginia, so I'm more in the thick of the Appalachian. That proximity both enables young, more city-dwelling people who make it a big deal to leave the city and their comfortability to go and not make it this big effort. It's, I can leave on Friday because I'm a high-performing person and I leave work at 6 or 7 on Friday night. And again, Nashville, Atlanta, 42% of all the 20 million in 2023 are from the Atlanta metro area. So again, they just have an understanding of the type of talent and experiences that they're used to. So this works well.
I mean, so are you guys calling all the capital up front? What kind of returns are there? Is you guys paying out returns over time? Is it lump sum payout at the end?
So yes, we're calling all the capital. We have half of the capital is committed and funded in the account. The loan is in progress of closing. We'll be using the equity capital first in the construction process, which is already started, in which Tanner and Melissa have funded, including their funding of the land acquisition as well. So it will continue to move forward. Investor committed capital, which we expect to wrap in the next 7 to 10 days, will be a part of that. The loan capital will fund through the completion of construction in the spring, and then distributions are made quarterly. There is a preferred return to investors that is 100% to LP investors, 100% return of capital plus an 8% preferred return annualized before the general partnership starts participating. So once you receive your capital plus an 8% annualized return, then it moves to 20% of cash flows are moving to the GP, 80% of cash flows to the LP until you hit a net annualized return of a 12%. Once that 12% return has been hit, every dollar out moving forward, the cash flows coming out moving forward, is 40% to the general partner, 60% to the limited partnership. And the net return then from that, so that's net of the general partner promote following that waterfall I just laid out, is 31.9% and 4.3x in the model as of today.
Over a 7-year horizon.
Right. That's assuming a refinance, which that discussion's already started with the bank. That part of that refinance, a large amount of it goes to the expansion, and then an assumed sale in year 7.
Anything else?
Mhm.
Any other questions anybody has? Happy to take the time to answer those questions.
Kind of a minor question. I mean, so first of all, congratulations on getting with like $1 million of pre-bookings up front. Was that the number? Something like 900,000 or a million?
It's just under 800,000. Yeah, 792. Thank
Awesome.
you. Thank you. Yeah.
What does that actually mean? Have people actually bought, if that's a non-refundable deal, have they actually bought, they're actually like, I just booked a stay on like June 1st to June 3rd. Did they actually book a particular stay, or they just booked the right to like get first in line to take first available?
Yeah, that's a great question, Justin. So the short answer is yes, they did fully pre-purchase. Per Indiegogo's policies, it is very entrepreneur leaning. So that cash is in hand, it is ours, and it is, I think they have a 14-day refund policy, but after that, that cash is obviously in our hands, which is why it's in our accounts. At the time, and we were very clear with our backers when we did this was simply them pre-purchasing a stay. And then when we open up the booking calendar, they will actually book their date. So we let them know that, hey, it would be within this time frame. One of the things that we did was we actually offered a lower rate, but then we offered the opportunity for people to upgrade their booking status, which would give them, basically put them sooner in line. So we had a platinum, gold, and silver upgrade that they could do with limited spots in each one. And that was basically, well, for 2 reasons. Number one, people asked us for that. The VIPs came and said, hey, like, I actually don't care about having the best discount. I actually want to be like the first in line. We were like, great. Yeah. So we hear you on that. The other reason that was important was that actually was part of the main reason it increased our ADR. So people just wanting to be able to pre-purchase these upgrades to get first in line. So we have basically then 4 buckets, if you will. So when we open up the booking calendar, we will move through each bucket until everyone has picked their dates. We don't anticipate doing that. And again, we've been very open and clear with our backers on this till probably late January, early February. We want to make sure we get through foundations, which obviously is the most weather dependent element of this, and really get into the vertical build before we open it up so that we have a very firm opening date.
And to loop fully, Indiegogo is a very large and very seasoned crowdfunding website. To be very specific, most of these, and our campaign specifically, is what you would call a rewards-based crowdfunding. So no equity exchange at all. This was purely rewards, and rewards translate, in this case, the number of nights you booked.
On the financial front, I'd point out, they referenced a few other successful crowdfunding campaigns. A lot of those use the crowdfund capital for construction and were successful, one of which was not in finishing the project. And there was a huge backlash and a lawsuit. Ultimately, that project in Utah just raised additional investor capital to fund their overage, but it was a huge issue. So not only, Tanner and Melissa's decision not to use that money for construction, it belayed that reputational risk. Money is in the bank account and it will be in the bank account when the project opens. It's not going towards construction. That is all there to cover the operating expense of year 1, which is at roughly, because that the pre-bookings include phase 2 bookings, it's less than 50%. The operating expense for year 1 is less than 50% of what is already in the bank account. So even should things go terribly wrong on an operational standpoint, we're covered for this project by a wide margin. So I think that's an incredible thing to point out. A whole new frontier, I think, and Tanner and Melissa are at the front of it. When I say there's other projects, there's maybe 3 other projects that have done this in the country. And I think it's going to really be a common thing that you see going forward. And, Tanner and Melissa were at the front of that. So worth noting. Well, if that's it, next steps, we're going to follow up with the data room that has everything that you could possibly want to look at, which will have instructions and kind of phasing for expected signing date for subscription documents and commitments, and then funding, and then the timeline for the project and how it moves forward from there. And any further questions can be sent back via email, and if to have a call to address those, that can be made available too for interested investors.